5, 6, 7, 8.
Welcome to the EX podcast, where every week I talk with business leaders, authors, and disruptors on how the workplace is changing. The podcast brings a different lens to the conversation around HR transformation, company culture, and employee engagements. It offers a brand and customer experience perspective rather than a traditional HR perspective. Why? Because companies have to think of themselves as employment brands if they want to attract and retain talents. It is time we put people first to rehumanize the workplace. Simply because leaders who don't care about the employees will eventually be surrounded by people who don't care about their business. Today's guest is Kevin Kruse. He is the founder and CEO of LEADx, the first company to create a virtual executive coach using IBM Watson artificial intelligence. He's also a New York Times best-selling author of 9 books. His brand new book is Great Leaders Have No Rules: Contrarian Leadership Principles to Transform Your Team and Business. Today with Kevin, we talk about what is good leadership and how to create a successful EX initiative. We also talk about some of the highlights of his book, such as Close Your Open Door Policy, Have No Rules, Lead with Love, Reveal Everything, and Show Weakness. And we conclude our conversation with the rise of robot bosses. Support for this podcast is brought to you by Culture Amp. Eliminate the guesswork of company culture with Culture Amp, the world's largest independent employee feedback platform. Culture Amp goes beyond aggregating survey results to deliver rich insights and data-driven action plans on an easy-to-use interface. With a powerful platform, science-backed surveys, and a focus on its customer success, Culture Amp helps you increase employee engagement and build a positive company culture. Start developing a deep understanding of your employees' experience today by visiting cultureamp.com/ex. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Kevin, and because it takes a good amount of time to produce this podcast, please make sure to review the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, or YouTube, as it would help promote the content. If you want me to speak at your next events, get some advice on your EX initiatives, or send me feedback and suggestions for future topics or guests, you can reach me at svincent@exsummits.com or on Twitter at @EX_summit. All right, let's get to it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the EX podcast. Very excited for today's guest, Kevin Kruse. Kevin is calling from Philadelphia. He's the founder and CEO of LEADx, the first company to create a virtual executive coaching using IBM Watson artificial intelligence. He's also the host of the LEADx Leadership podcast and the New York Times best-selling author of 9 books. His brand new book is Great Leaders Have No Rules: Contrarian Leadership Principles to Transform Your Team and Your Business. Kevin, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me on the show. And I think it was meant to be. My company is LEADx. You've got the EX show, so it just had to happen.
Exactly. Yes, with a big X as exactly. So tell us a bit about who Kevin is and what you do at LEADx.
Sure. You mentioned I'm out of Philadelphia. I'm 50 years old, single dad with 3 kids, and for the last 3 decades, I've been, I guess you'd call it a serial entrepreneur, starting companies in the e-learning and HR tech space. And LEADx is one that I started just 2 years ago. We're still sort of in startup mode. And so my role was really to kick it off and now to lead our small team as we're trying to educate the marketplace and forge new ground and using artificial intelligence to help leaders.
What's the place of Watson in what you do, and how does it work?
Sure. So we call her Coach Amanda, and she's one part of this leadership development platform. It runs on your iPhone or iPad, or you could log into a website, and it's kind of like messaging your good friend if your friend happens to be an executive coach. So Amanda has a whole personality and backstory, and she'll include emojis and giffies, to try to have a sense of humor. And IBM Watson's running in the background to first, Watson diagnoses your personality. Watson runs the chatbot, the natural language processing, and we use it to personalize your experience. So you get a personalized learning plan, and you get personalized training from Coach Amanda based on your personality and experience. And, Stefan, I always say, someday, Coach Amanda is not as good as a human executive coach is today. By no means. AI isn't to that level. But I think, we are not that many years away from all of us being able to have a digital equivalent of whoever our favorite guide is. If we want to be motivated today, we might, buy a book from Tony Robbins or go to his event. If we want to save money, we would buy a book from Dave Ramsey or go to one of his events, or whatever it might be. Leadership. Hopefully they'll buy a Kevin Kruse book every now and then, but they're probably buying Blanchard or John Maxwell. But in the future, we will have Blanchard or Maxwell or Tony Robbins or Dave Ramsey just with us all of the time to observe, to make suggestions, to answer our questions, to motivate us. And of course, it'll be a digital version of them. Instead of them just writing a book, they'll have an AI-powered chatbot that we can hire to follow us around all the time.
So right now, is it reactive in the sense that you ask questions and then you get advice from Amanda, or is it also proactive and Amanda is listening to you and then she tells you, or she gives you advice on what you should say and what you should not say?
Yeah, she does not yet listen to you. So you certainly can ask a question, and you can also let's say she'll suggest that you focus on becoming a better delegator. And because she knows your personality, she will say, "Hey, Kevin, you're very high in conscientiousness, which is good, but don't let that become perfectionism. If you ever think, oh, I'm not going to delegate because it's just faster to do it myself," she'll remind me that might be true, but you're also delegating to develop your team members. It's not just about saving time. And of course, if I was low in conscientiousness, my personality, well, she gives different advice. She'll say, "Kevin, it's great. You're probably dumping things on people like crazy because you're a big picture kind of guy, but there's a difference between dumping and delegating. Don't forget to tell them about a deadline and the resources they have, and et cetera." So it's proactive in that, she will give you advice and training based on your needs, your personality, but she's not actually listening yet. There will be a day when she does that, but we're still a few years away from that, I think.
Okay, so I've got to ask you a silly question before we continue a more serious conversation. Why Amanda? Why not Kevin?
Well, people think it's because my oldest daughter is named Amanda, but that's not true. My oldest daughter is named Amanda, but that's not why we picked the name. For voice interfaces to work, they always have a watchword like Alexa or Siri or something like that. Yeah. And the longer and the more syllables in the word, the better. That's one. So it doesn't get confused with another word. So Amanda is 3 syllables. That's pretty strong. And then we, from day one, right now, we only support the English language. But we know that a very large, fast-growing market is actually China. And many letters and many English words are difficult to pronounce to people in China just because it's unfamiliar. However, I found out through some research that it's common for professionals in China to take an English name, like a fake English name, especially if they're working with the West. And the most popular female name to adopt in China, English name, is Amanda right now. So we figured, okay, if that's a popular name and people are used to saying it, then we're ready for expanding to China in a couple of years.
That's awesome. Actually, it was not a silly question after all. It was a very well thought process. I love it. All right. We talk a lot on this show about employee experience design and employee engagement strategy. And I see a lot of good intentions in many organizations, but when EX fail or EX efforts fail, and they often fail, it's mostly due to a lack of accountability and follow through from the organization's leaders. From your experience coaching and as an entrepreneur, what is good leadership and how do you create successful EX initiatives?
Yeah, and it's interesting. So Stefan, I love the topic of employee engagement. I wrote a book called Employee Engagement 2.0. I wrote another book called Employee Engagement for Everyone. My first book was called We, and it was all about employee engagement. So, I've done 3 books on it. Now, that was 10 years ago, and back then that term and the idea of employee experience wasn't around. I'm so old. I was hardcore employee engagement, and I know now the conversation has kind of shifted a little bit, and I'm not as up to speed on employee experience. However, I would agree. I think when it comes to employee engagement or experience initiatives failing, it typically doesn't have the support from the top, and or they're not taking the answers from the bottom, from the grassroots. Mm-hmm. So, what I see all the time is, let's say a company sends out an employee engagement survey. Good. Not everybody does that. So that's a good first step. But then they don't always share the data with the managers. They kind of hold on to it and up at the top. Well, you got to give that data. You got to give the report to each manager. So, she knows, oh, I'm above average or below average compared to the others around here. And you've got to make sure that your managers are sharing it with their team so that action planning can happen down at the grassroots level. Even if in a large organization, every single team had their number one problem area, focus areas, let's say communication, and it never is all the same. But if it was, that's okay. It doesn't mean that the heads of HR and all that figure out the answer, because how to improve communication in the IT department might be very different than how you improve communication in the sales department. And since we know 70% of employee engagement, the variance ties back to who your manager is, even within, say, the sales department, getting the team members to improve communication on Kevin's team might be different than how to do it on Stefan's team. So it really has to be grassroots, in my opinion.
I completely agree. I would say probably the main reason why any EX or employee engagement initiatives succeed or fail is because of that mid-layer of management. Because they are the relays of the executive suite's decision focus on EX, but if they just can't deliver and enhance that experience on a day-to-day basis, that's where it fails.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
So you have a brand new book coming up on April 2nd, Great Leaders Have No Rules, which I love, Contrarian Leadership Principles to Transform Your Team and Your Business. We're not going to go through to reveal everything that is in the book today, but let's discuss a few points. One of the no rules is close your open door policy. What is it? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, and thanks. The idea of the book is, let's take a look at some of this classic management wisdom that just no longer fits. And that it all starts with that old open door policy, which comes from good intentions. The idea is it'll facilitate communication and break down barriers, and you can leapfrog your boss and just go talk to the CEO, whatever you want to do. The intent is good, and maybe it worked at one point. This day and age, we are all so busy. It is so difficult to get deep work done, focused work done, to be productive, that having that dreaded got a minute, is just horrible. And whether it's not everybody's in an office. So sometimes it's an actual door. Sometimes it's that tap on the shoulder in an open workspace. Or maybe it's your phone buzzing with a Slack message, someone saying, hey, got a minute? Whatever it is, it's the metaphor for interruptions and helping people at any time they want to be helped. And on the manager side, on the leader side, it's killing our productivity. It is just absolutely getting us off task, and it takes a long time to switch and get back into the zone. But even on for our team members, Marshall Goldsmith wrote some great papers on this area, saying, listen, if your team members are coming through your door all the time, that's a problem. Like, did you not hire the right people? Did you not give them the right training? Do they not have the right tools? Or are they so afraid to make a decision or to make a mistake that they've got to run everything by you? Well, that's a psychological safety problem. So instead of having a wide open door all of the time, perhaps better would be to say, listen, I'm not exactly doing an open door policy, but I do have office hours, and whatever it is, every day between 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock, I'll have my open door policy, or Friday all day is my open door policy. But other than the office hours, if you want even 15 minutes of my time, ask for a meeting, ask for an appointment. Let's do 15-minute slots that are pre-scheduled. That way you can be prepared, I can be prepared, and we'll put it in a time when it's not going to interrupt some deep work.
It's very interesting because I was listening to you. I was thinking of my first manager during my first job, and he was more of a mentor than anything else. But he had, the door of his office was always open. He always asked me, if you come to me for advice, you better have the answer to your question already. And you want me to validate or to give an input, but I'm not going to give you an answer to your question.
It's great.
Right, and I love it because it's totally aligned with what you were saying. Employees come and ask their managers for advice without thinking through and trying to solve problems themselves. And then there's an issue either from a recruiting perspective, from a training perspective. So the second point is have no rule. That's quite disturbing in the workplace.
Yes. So let me first say there are a few times when rules make sense. So, one is if it's the law, you're required to do something, that's got to be a rule. The second is if there's a physical safety item. I've done a lot of work with a particular railroad company, and they have rules that you can't wear, earbuds while you're working on the track. That is a good rule. You don't want to be not hearing a train, coming down the track. And the third time would be if you hire bad people, dumb people, you might need some rules to contain them. But in general, we don't need all the rules that we have. We don't need the employee handbooks that we have. And here's why. Every time I bump into a rule, it prevents me from making a choice. It prevents me from making a decision. And all of a sudden it becomes more your company than my company because I don't have control. And let me tell you a quick story. Like, this is how I got this idea 20 years ago. I had sold one of my companies, merged in, and was now a partner, vice president, reported to the CEO. And the CEO told me before the merger, hey, we're all equal partners here. We're one vote. We're going to grow this company together. And 30 days in, I get an expense check back. I had submitted an expense report, but the check was short by like $4. That wasn't a big deal, but I just thought it was strange. So I sent a note to the CFO saying, hey, not sure if I did something wrong. We filled out the form wrong, but it was short. And he says, oh, it's short $4.32 because we don't reimburse for Post-it notes. And then at the same time, another friend of mine who had just come into the organization said, oh, he got shorted on his expense report because he had been traveling and he had a meal out, when he was on the road. He had ordered a beer as his beverage, and they shorted him the price of the beer, the $4 for the beer. And they told him, we don't reimburse for alcohol. So he could have bought a $6 milkshake. They would have paid for that, but they wouldn't pay for his $4 beer. Now, I went to the CEO, and this became what was known as the Post-it note war. So it became a big issue. We were fighting for this to get rid of these stupid rules. And the CEO, my boss, explained to me, he says, listen, Kevin, he says, I don't care about Post-it notes. He said, one of our values, and it was a written value, is growth and profit. And he said, that's not our mission, but that's not why we exist, but we need that to exist. It's like the air you breathe. And as an example of that, he says, most people buy Post-it notes and they write phone messages on them and use it like any kind of note. He said, look what I use. And he had ripped up pieces of scrap paper on his desk, little squares. He says, this is what I use to take notes. And I've saved the company money. So he says, it's a symbol. It's a symbol about being frugal. So when he explained all that to me, I never again tried to buy Post-it notes. And it was odd, but I understood, and he abolished the rule. So he abolished the rule, but I still didn't buy Post-it notes. And here's the point. When you impose a rule, generally, so where's the good place that it's coming? What was the good intent? Well, it's trying to save the organization from the 1% of knuckleheads that are doing something wrong or wasting money or whatever. So you're now disengaging and interfering with the 99% to protect against the 1%. And instead, rules take away conversation. Rules get in the way of relationship. And so instead of a rule, you want to have good values, actionable values. You want to build a relationship and have a conversation around those. And if someone violates the unwritten rule, the culture, that's a coachable moment. They could have paid my expense report in full, and then during my next one-on-one meeting, he could have said, hey, listen, Kevin, I know you're brand new here. I just want to explain something to you. You put Post-it notes in. Here's what I think about them, blah, 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 blah. And then it would have been, oh, okay, I get it. I'm not prevented from buying them, but I've got a relationship. I understand what's important around here. I get it now. And it would have been totally fine. And I think this extends, if you think it's controversial about workplace rules, it's in the family as well. My father had strict rules, and if my sisters came home 5 minutes past curfew, forget about 10 minutes, it was a big fight, right? And they would have to lie and say their watch only says it's 9:55, not 10 o'clock. So they either felt guilty or now were liars. He felt like it was a respect and a power thing, and it would just be this big thing that hurt relationship and definitely sent the signal, it's Dad's house. It ain't your house. He's it. With my own teens, and I've been blessed. They've been like gifts. Like they've been perfect little kids. And they're older now. But instead of having a curfew, instead of having rules, I would just say, hey, I know you're going out to that party tonight. What time do you think you're going to be home? Because as you know, I love you so much and I care about you so much that I'm not going to be able to fall asleep until I know you're home safely, because I'll be worried. And by the way, I've got to get up early and go to that thing tomorrow. So when do you think you're going to be home by? And they'll say 10 o'clock. Usually they always say an earlier time than when I would have said. So I think it sounds crazy, but you want to control actions based on values, conversation, and relationship.
Yeah, it's accountability and responsibility for everyone, right? Let me ask you this then. There are many companies who are experimenting, who actually moved from a specific number of days of vacation time versus unlimited vacation time, and it's very similar to what you were saying.
Exactly.
Are they, if we move to unlimited vacation time, is there going to be any abuse? Is everybody going to take 2 months off? What's going to happen? And there are many reasons why, I would say, untold reasons why companies decide to move to unlimited PTO time.
Yeah, I think that's a good example. And at LEADx, we have almost no rules. Like our employee handbook is about a page long, and we have no specified sick days, paid time off, vacation, holidays even. And the most famous example isn't going to be LEADx. It's going to be Netflix. And, Netflix, that whole no rules culture is about, look, you got to do a really good job of hiring great people, responsible people that are aligned with your mission. We're all fighting for the same thing. We're all really good. And don't babysit. Trust that they'll know the right thing to do. And then if someone is, taking too much, quote unquote, too much vacation, and it's interfering with their job responsibilities, or, and this is usually the case, people are not taking enough vacation and it's interfering with work-life balance and long-term sustainability, well, then you've got to have a conversation around those things. And, my experience, so my previous startups also had no vacation policies. And so, I've had 20 years of never telling anybody how many days they can take off. It's never been an issue. Again, my experience has been, if anything, people will come to me, sheepishly. Katrina recently said, hey, Kevin, I know I just took a week off and went to Colorado, 2 months ago, but some friends of mine who I haven't seen in a long time, they're doing this epic trip. They invited me along, blah, blah, blah. It's a conversation. And I say, okay, what are the big deliverables, in that month? Who are you working with? Do you think we're going to still hit those? Do you need to coordinate with anybody? And she explains, she's thought it through. Everything's covered. Business goes on. I'm like, great, knock yourself out. Have fun. Send us some pictures. So I think, there will be people who might abuse it or might not understand it, but it's never just like, don't show up for work if you don't want to show up. It's always choose, you have unlimited vacation days with prior approval, from your manager and under the assumption that it doesn't interfere with normal work expectations.
Right. Yep.
So that's kind of the way. Again, you're kind of putting guardrails up on it.
Other talking points in your book: lead with love.
Lead with love. What a crazy thing, especially in this time of Me Too. We can't lead with love, right? Yeah, it's. I changed on this because it was the basketball coach. I'm not a big sports guy, but the legendary basketball coach John Wooden, who used to tell his players, like on day one, they'd all get through college basketball, they'd show up, and he'd say, "I ain't gonna like you all the same. I'm not gonna like you all equally, but I will love you all equally." And what this gets at, it's certainly not the love that's going to get you in trouble with your HR department. We're talking about that deeper, like spiritual and religious. The Greeks called it agape. It's like a love for humanity, a love for your fellow, person, man or woman. And you don't. It's sort of like, think of your kids. There could be times when your kids are acting like a total brat or they're going through something in their teenage years, and you do not like being around them. They are not pleasant to be around. You do not like being around your own child for that hour or day or year. You still love them just as much as you always have. So you can love someone without necessarily liking them or wanting to go hang out with them. And so when you lead with love, all that's saying is that you're putting them before you. You're looking out for your neighbor. Treat your neighbor as you would yourself. So instead of leadership being about, I'm going to achieve my goal and I'm going to climb up the next rung on the ladder, people who lead with love are thinking about, it's servant leadership. It's, how can I serve the team member that I'm blessed to have now? I might not like Joe over there, or my favorite is this one over here, but I can care about them all equally. Even if they push my buttons, even if they get me frustrated, I can say, okay, that's fine. They are who they are. We've got different personalities or whatever it is, but still, how can I serve them best?
You mentioned Netflix earlier, and one of their core values is transparency, which goes very likely with your next point, which is reveal everything. Can we really reveal anything or everything in an organization?
Yes, and I think even down to salaries, and here's why. Now I'm an old guy. I'm 51, so certainly when I was coming up and being raised, nobody would think of talking about salaries. And I was told, like, as a manager, you never want to tell people like the bad news that's going on in a company, because then they'll all freshen up their resume and look for jobs. You had to keep that from people. They can't handle the truth. And here's the thing. First of all, there's reality. Like with the internet and the millennial generation, people have access to information that easier than ever before. If you want to know what the going rate is for your job, you just go on the PayScale or salary.com or any of these other websites, and down to your city and title, you're going to get a range, and you'll know if you're in range or out of range. And often in your own company, if your company's big enough, you'll say like, 8 people that have the sales manager job at Acme Company have reported these salaries. So it's more transparent anyway. And you think about in the federal workforce, everybody knows each other's grade, their like rank or title, and it's tied to pay. Like, so you think about the millions and millions of federal workers in the United States, everybody knows each other's salary. Most people don't know that in most states. You could look up the salary of the teachers and the superintendent. They're public servants. All of this is out there. And in terms of the bad news in a company, you've got to believe that whatever is going on in your company, if you're not talking about it and sharing it, the rumor mill, they're going to assume it's something worse. So a better approach is to just be balanced with the facts and say, hey, listen, here's my monthly update, weekly update, quarterly update, whatever it is. Here's all the great stuff that's just happened and where our focus is going to be on the future. Here's some numbers we've missed. Here's some trend lines we don't like to see. Here's what we're going to do to address it. And by sharing the quote unquote bad stuff, first of all, you're earning trust. You're earning trust by being, honest about it, and they'll believe you in the future when you have to share things. But it also gives them a chance to help. Hey, we're going to miss our numbers bad, and we might have to do layoffs soon if we don't turn it around. Okay, what's everybody's idea for how to save money around here or to boost sales? And I think, again, everybody's talking about salaries anyway. And I finally, because of the conversation around gender disparity in pay and things like that, companies need to be able to defend and share how are they coming up with salaries. And a lot of the tech companies, Stefan, I think are doing a good job with this where, the Silicon, not all of them, but many of them, they'll just say, all right, listen, here's how we pay. We look at the going rate using payscale.com. We start at the 80th percentile for your role. And then, it's $10,000 more a year if you've got 5 or more years experience. It's $5,000 more if you're willing to work out of headquarters or whatever their formula is. At least they're transparent about it. And maybe you and I are in the same role and we're $2,500 apart, $5,000 apart, whatever it is, it's not going to be much. And if they're transparent, we know what those triggers are. We know why. And it could be performance reviews, so it still lets the company, still lets the leadership treat their star performers like stars.
For whatever reason, it's really hard to implement in organizations. There's a layer of scrutiny and secret of how much information we should divulge, how much information we should keep for us. Salaries are one thing. I think that when an organization is facing financial trouble, that's where most of the information actually is held up and not necessarily shared with the employees.
Yeah, but I guess it depends on the time frame. There was someone I knew who kind of jokingly said, we don't keep secrets here. There's just different timetables of notification.
Okay.
And so if you think about, the big companies out there, they're publicly traded companies. So every 90 days, they have to reveal to the public, here's how we did. Here's our sales. Here's our profits. Here's where we're missing, et cetera. So all their employees at the longest are 90 days away from deciding, am I going to look for another job or not? And so you could argue those companies are being secretive on 90-day cycles, I guess. But that's not very long. And in general, I think when you are transparent, people realize there's ups and downs. There's boom times and recessions. There's growth times and times to pare back. And I think the more transparent companies can be, the better off for everyone, the company and the individual workers. If a company's not transparent with those numbers, it's just lack of will. They don't believe it's in their benefit, but I think it is.
Another point is show weakness.
Yeah, this goes right along with transparency. Transparency and vulnerability. And
yes.
With vulnerability, and it's almost now an overused term, but authentic leadership, being authentic. Once again, I was told by many people when I was younger, Kevin, leadership is being a leader is being an actor. Being a leader is wearing a mask. You can't let them know that you have failed or made mistakes. You never can say, I don't know, because all of this shows weakness. It erodes authority and respect, and then they're not going to do what you tell them to do, blah, blah, blah. And maybe that was back in the day, but that's no longer truth. If you want people to feel connected, to feel engaged, to give it their all, they need to feel that they're connected to you. They need to feel that you care about them. And the best, fastest way you can instill trust is by saying, hey, I'm human. I make mistakes, and here's some whoppers I've made in the past. And when you are willing to share the times you say, I don't know, but I'll get back to you, or I don't know, but I'll find out, or hey, that's not a strength, but I know someone who does have that strength, they're going to feel more comfortable coming to you earlier with problems and mistakes. So if any organization values innovation, you need to also value risk taking and view failures as just experiments that didn't go right, that you need to try something else. And so by sharing your weaknesses, by sharing your vulnerabilities, it instills this psychological safety to let everybody kind of bring their whole self to work and say to the boss, hey, I'm behind on this project. I messed up, and here's how I'm going to fix it. I hope you're going to support me. Or, you know what? I'm really good at these areas, but I'm such a driver. I'm horrible at saying thanks and providing appreciation. I'd like to focus on that as a developmental goal. It's just a much more honest conversation.
And I often make the analogy of EX is like software development, where you go through a mini viable product, you experiment it, you make some iterations based on the feedback that you get, you make some enhancements, you test it again until you find the right finished product. And whether you're reshaping, you're building your company culture, and you're implementing EX initiatives, it's all about testing and accepting that it's going to fail at some point.
Right.
But what are the things you can learn to make it better, and you test it again and again and again and again.
And that's the creed of the modern entrepreneur too, right? I mean, it's you don't assume you've got it all figured out. It's right. That you're gonna try something, take that feedback, close that feedback loop, and iterate and go out again, and then feedback loop and iterate. And that's exactly right. Employee experience initiatives should be thought of in the exact same way.
Going back to LEADx and what you guys are doing in terms of coaching and using IBM Watson technology, how do you see the future of the workplace, but maybe in the next 5 years or so, using AR, AI and chatbot and machine learning? How much automation and how much personalization can we create leveraging those technologies?
People talk about like the fear of robots taking away all of our jobs. In 5 years, the robots will be taking away our bosses' jobs. So I think in 5 years, 67% of managers will be replaced by robots. 67% of us will report to a robot boss, and we are going to love that robot boss more than we love our human boss. And the reason why I say 67% is because that's roughly the percent of managers who are not engaging their team members. Only about 1/3 of employees are engaged at work. They are reporting to leaders who are doing things right on the people side. And it's going to be gradual. We're not going to know that we're now reporting to a robot boss, even though it will be like a screen or on our phone or a little metallic man or woman on our desk. The HR won't call our boss, but what's going to happen is span of control is going to expand. So if today I'm a good manager and I've got, it's already happened. It used to be a manager would have 6 direct reports, like 1950s. Then it was maybe up to 8, 10's pushing it. Today, routinely, people have 10 to 15 direct reports. It's not unusual, especially in IT, to have 20 direct reports. And that trend's going to continue. So the people who are doing good boss things, good engagement things, are going to get more and more direct reports. Now, when I've got 30 people reporting to me, I can no longer have one-on-one meetings with all of them every Monday. So instead of weekly check-ins, it's going to be bi-weekly, and then every 3rd week, and then every 4th week. And what do all the workers do in between the human one-on-ones? They are going to be talking to their robot boss, and the robot boss is going to be so much better than their old boss, because the robot boss, and this is available today, the robot boss will know your personality. They're going to remember everything about where you used to work. They're going to remember every bit of your Gallup Clifton Strengths Finder. They're going to know your competencies, what you're good at, what you're not good at. They're going to know your career roadmap so they can be on the lookout for opportunities for you. And they're also going to know everything else, like, based on your facial patterns and your email language. Are you feeling stressed out or depressed? Are you maybe even a flight risk and they need to give you some extra attention or check in on you or get you some help so you're not going to burn out? Or are you totally engaged, and they can take that from a variety of measures? So I actually think the bosses are going to get replaced first. And it's not going to be too difficult for our robot bosses to support us. And hey, they already tell jokes, they play games, they're having personalities, and so many people are already treating their automobile like a person. Soldiers in the Middle East are getting these combat robots, and when they get blow up, the soldiers are crying like they've lost a human companion. We tend to humanize the objects we care about around us, and we will humanize our robot boss very quickly.
It's fascinating because it sounds like a robot boss will actually be more empathetic and human than maybe some of the real human bosses.
I can tell you when they're listening to you, they won't be sitting there typing away on their laptop, only half listening.
Okay. Well, now at this point of the podcast, usually I like to ask some personal and fun questions so that our audience get to know our guests a bit more intimately. The first one I've got to ask you, because we were talking about reveal everything and show weakness. What was your biggest screw up and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, I mean, I've had some big ones, including driving companies into the ground. I mean, my first two companies failed miserably. But I think more helpful is a pretty big one was I was demoted. I was running a 300-something person team, fast growing and all the rest. And I got demoted and my vice president of sales took my job. We kind of flipped. And our CEO, like the lesson learned was our CEO cared about sales. That was like the number one. And I knew that and was driving sales in the right direction. However, being not the VP of sales, I also cared about, say, product development. And so I made the mistake of being transparent up to a point where 80% of my commentary and worry was around product development, 20% was maybe around sales. And he lost confidence in me. He felt like, hey, my number one thing is sales. And what Kevin's mainly talking to me about is that, and I was talking about pretty big problems, the servers have been down for 2 days. Our clients are a little upset. Or, I just got hit with this surprise request for a $1 million database system that we didn't know we needed. These are pretty big things. I'm coming to him with tech problem, product problem, et cetera. And he's all about, but sales. And so he felt more comfortable. He didn't fire me outright, but he demoted me down. And then my VP of sales, who really didn't care about the details of the product, he didn't care about customer service. He just cared about whipping the sales force and pushing those numbers. And so 95% of what he would talk to the CEO about was, here's our forecast. We're going to close that deal today. Oh, you would have loved to have seen this sales call today. And that was a big lesson for me. I mean, you got to really understand, what is it your boss wants? What is it your boss cares about? And then deliver. And then deliver if you want to keep that job.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I should have been an FBI agent.
Why?
Well, I'm all about offering hope and help to people. And I think I do that through, I think leadership is a superpower. So I'm doing that. I'm democratizing leadership through AI coaching and things. But I think FBI agents and, I could be big city homicide detective, you're helping people, but a more direct way. I mean, like people and see, and you're tracking down, horrific, criminals or terrorists or bank fraud people, whatever they are. Like you're really tracking down some bad guys. So I think like the puzzle and the challenge part would be interesting. Being, face to face with people who you could help, and in that way, I think that would be really cool.
Who is the most inspiring leader that you've either met or that you've followed? It could be someone, a historical figure, it could be a political leader, whoever it can be.
Well, I'd answer it this way. So the one that's had the my favorite leader, I consider him a mentor, is a guy named Bill Erickson. Used to work with me at Connexa. He was at Gallup beforehand. And Bill is the one that really taught me about engagement and connection and all the rest. I mean, he's the one that's had the most personal impact. I think what I'm fascinated by is if you look at modern day examples of leadership, we're all horrible. I mean, a great business leader might last 20 years. A great military leader might be remembered for 100 years or a couple hundred years. To me, the most incredible leaders have been the founders of the big world religions. So if you think about like Buddha, Siddhartha, the founder of Buddhism, this is 2,500 years ago, and today there's 500 million people who are still followers. Well, I'm not going to do anything, and no company's going to do anything that will have followers 2,500 years from now. So how are those leaders, the religious leaders, the spiritual leaders, what do they do? How, and it's more like, how are they? How do you be in order to create such a massive following? I mean, that's what I wish I understood more about, and would love to, go back in time and meet them.
What sound or noise do you love?
I love the sound of my kids laughing, which I'm sure a lot of parents do, but I've got a weird one, which is the sound of like a breeze blowing through the screen of like an open window is just like, that's really probably my favorite sound.
The sound of the noise that you hate?
Okay, so behind my house is some woods, and so there's deer, there's fox, there's like little animals in the back there. And I don't know, a few times a year, like you'll hear an animal in pain, like something got hit by a car or something got attacked, and hearing this howling, painful noise all night long, it's really awful. That's really awful.
What could we spot you doing outside of work that would flabbergast your coworkers?
Well, I scream at the TV when I'm watching the Sixers basketball game. Most people are surprised at that. And probably nobody knows until this moment that when I'm alone, I like sing and dance to like Eminem or Pink or these other pop bands.
That's pretty cool. The Sixers are doing pretty well actually right now.
Hey, even beat the Warriors last night.
Yeah. The last question, or last couple of questions. What is your favorite word?
Potential. Easy.
And your least favorite word?
I think it's something like can't. Like that's whether I'm hearing like I can't, someone's saying I can't do it or they're saying they can't do it. That's a horrible word.
Yes, I agree with you. What is the way for our listeners to follow you and LEADx on social media?
Yeah, for me, and I love connecting with people. I answer, everybody's questions and emails and stuff like that. On Twitter, I'm just at Kruse, Kruse. Instagram is Kevin Author. And then on all platforms, it's LEADx Life, LEADx Life. They can find us.
Awesome. We'll share those on the podcast notes too. Any last word of advice or wisdom?
I would just say lead with intent. Realize that leadership is influence. So you need to lead yourself. You need to influence yourself. You need to lead in your home with your family, and of course you need to lead at work and lead in the community. Just lead with intent.
That's a great way to end our conversation today. Thank you so much, Kevin, for being with us on the show.
Thanks, Stefan.
Thanks for tuning in to the EX Podcast. If you want to learn more, visit our website at expodcast.com. If you want to find out more about our next conferences, go to exsummit.com. Finally, you can also find my manifesto on business to employee or B2E branding at b2ebranding.co. See you next week.